than ever Boyle Sports app. Multiples made easy and personalised content on every sport. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should it be an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Yeah, it is the football show on Off the Ball. It's Adrian and Dan with you this evening for the next 50 minutes or thereabouts. Lots of stuff to get to. We're going to talk Bundesliga because it's back and there's new dynamic at Bayern Munich. Are they going to be Champions League semi-finalists, quarter-finalists, finalists? Because, it looks as if the Bundesliga itself is going to be a bit of a cakewalk. New manager, though. So we're going to have some discussion with Jonathan Harding of the DW Sports about that a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk José Mourinho with the guy who asked him that question from the press conference the other day that resulted in the respect. So the future for Jose at Manchester United, get your thoughts in on all of that good stuff. We're also going to talk Damien Rice very shortly.
Oh, not Damien Rice again.
Damien Rice. That's the third time I've done that.
You're doomed now. I think now it's in your head.
Just when you're not really thinking about what you're saying. Declan Rice.
Maybe just people who really are interested in Damien Rice got a bit excited there for a few minutes.
There's not much to get excited about if you're a Damien Rice fan generally in life because,
that's harsh.
Melancholy.
You've insulted them.
I don't mind. I'm doubling down now.
Yeah.
So that's all coming. And Jamie Vardy, Gary Cahill both retired from England duty, so we'll discuss a little bit of that and a few other bits and bobs as well, including some strong and interesting stuff from Graham Kavanagh this week about Declan Rice-ish related type stuff. So all that's coming shortly. Nottingham Forest, as Richie was saying, are 1-0 up at home to Newcastle. Don't know if you saw that goal, Dan, but
I did. Daryl Murphy, yeah. Daryl Murphy. How many more goals does Daryl Murphy score this season before people start saying, "Come on, Daryl"?
How many is that now?
Well, that's 3, I think.
Right.
But still, it's. The season is young. How many more goals does he have to score before people start saying, you can do a couple of games for us?
Yeah.
Martin O'Neill, it was sort of lost in the in the other stuff. I think it's 34, 35 now. He might have been born in 1983. So I always remember footballers that are born roughly around the same. Those couple that might just be a bit younger than you or even older than you.
You're still the same age as obviously a bunch of players who are still playing.
Well, not really. No, there's
not many of them.
People are now retiring. Like John O'Shea is still going.
Yeah.
He's a year older.
Right.
But beyond that, it's getting to the stage now where your own football career you'd be described as a veteran if you're writing about yourself.
He didn't.
Which is a grim realisation.
It was a great goal and he didn't celebrate.
It was right in front of Newcastle fans. He did only spend a season there, but they quite liked him. And in fairness to Murphy and his representatives, he managed to get, I think, a 3-year deal out of Forest.
Right.
So,
Jesus,
but also as well, his family are basically living in Waterford, as far as I know. I think his wife and kids have moved back.
Right.
And he's very much, been open enough about he's doing what he can to get the best from his football career now. But the plan is to come home. So I guess when it comes to international breaks and stuff like that, I can sort of understand it if you're living away effectively, why you might want to be getting back to centre time. And in all seriousness, Murphy. He was the first choice striker in the playoff. But
we'd have him back if he scored.
You probably shouldn't need to be doing that. You have to at some stage. You're probably insulting the options coming up. But
it's not an insult if he's scoring as he is currently. If that sort of form, it may taper a small bit, but that rough sort of form continues.
It is a talking point. It's a fair point. Well, if he plays for the shelf life of his contract, that's fine, but I think Murphy's way of looking at it would be that when Euro 2020 comes round, he will be 37, I think, that year, and maybe it might be a struggle for him to be. So why start a campaign if he can't finish it? It was lost a small bit this week that Glenn Whelan is effectively he's not stepping away. He will not retire. But Martin O'Neill did say that Whelan will come back and captain the team in November against Northern Ireland in a friendly here, and he referenced John O'Shea's, so it's effectively a farewell game in all but name. But Whelan has said he's going to stay available in case of injuries, a bit like Jamie Vardy and Gary Cahill with England, who have stepped away this week at a younger age. I think 31 Vardy, 32 Cahill, and that's a bit of a surprise, but I guess in one way, if you're going to completely bring it back to our own patch. Cahill stepping away. Dan Ashworth, who's the the FA technical director, has been speaking about the lack of young quality central defenders, and naturally if one steps away in the form of Cahill, then maybe that's why they are working hard to tie down defenders of any quality.
And Cahill's thing was almost expected, wasn't it, to a large degree? Like, he was a guy who clearly isn't massively a part of Gareth Southgate's plans.
Not really. He was a fringe player at the World Cup. I saw him walking through a few mix zones over there. Well, no, he wasn't even sulking, but he just wasn't playing, so he was changed before everyone else. Another player, of course, who could have played for us, Steve Staunton just sort of tried to make approaches to him when he was a young player at Aston Villa, and in another circumstances he might have taken the call, but at that stage he paused, and sure enough it came his way in the end. His
retirement sort of hastened Southgate's, if that's what's going on, his push to get Declan Rice?
Well, yeah, it's not even specifically Declan Rice, although I certainly think it's a factor. I just think the way the English FA seem to be doing their business at the moment is they don't want to miss anyone. And if there's a position where they might have a problem, then they're going to probably try and farm any player in that area and make sure they don't lose out on them. I mean, I mentioned it a bit earlier on that the Southgate is naming a squad tomorrow, but Declan Rice can't be in it because he needs to go through a paperwork process. So it can be months before, if he decides to go to England, it's months before he could be ever picked by them. So in the meantime, I mean, Cahill's not there. I mean, they might look at other young defenders and players in the squad who suddenly thrive, and there's all these other elements to it here. But
well, they're coming from a strong position, like a very strong position that people didn't really fully expect them to be in. They blitzed the World Cup in a way that we didn't really expect them to do it from the outset. So, like, they're coming from a strong position. They probably have that.
It was a blitz of sorts. It was a blitz of publicity and positivity, as opposed to, like, I mean, they didn't really steamroll their way through the tournament.
They certainly sort of reached a point in the tournament that nobody expected them to.
No. Listen, I'm not.
I mean, the hindsight merchants, really, which I'm absolutely happy to include myself in, were like, well, this makes total sense. Yeah. But certainly at the start, you were thinking, Anyway,
no, I am being pedantic. They did do very well, and I think it's more the blitz instead of publicity and positivity and energy, and this is the other thing, that for years we always prided ourselves here on the fact that the Irish squad has a spirit, and the English camp, all these pundits on BT Sport and so on, talking about how they were riddled by cliques and sort of infighting, and how they all didn't like playing for England. And now suddenly we had an English team that looked like they enjoyed playing for England, and that certainly is probably where they really did steal a march on the positivity.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that Richard Keys has been tweeting about these.
Oh yes, today. Richard Keys. I don't have the specific tweet in front of me here because I don't follow Richard Keys. I'm missing out.
I'm urging people to go and check it out. I'm not necessarily urging us to get overly involved with the.
He's on a roll, Richard.
Nonsense that's going on.
He's on a roll.
Check it out. Check out.
Have a look.
Out the responses.
He's already backed Mike Ashley in the past week, and then he spoke about lack of character from Jamie Vardy and Gary. He said these people, it's a lack of character that will let you down later on in life, which is a sort of extraordinary statement. Yeah. I mean, later it's suggesting maybe when Vardy and Cahill are in their 40s, they might screw you over in some situation. Yeah. But anyway, I did notice that Richard Keys didn't get a huge amount of traction in terms of retweets and all this, but there was a lot of replies, thousands of replies
questioning his character.
His character. I mean, I'd say people had delved into the glossary of Richard Keys' history in the area of character, and I think he's sort of come off
an interesting
second best in that debate.
Glossary. Peter McCarthy's been in touch on Facebook. He says, what's happening with Patrick Bamford? Any other news on players that we can get through the granny rule? Did Martin O'Neill mention?
Yeah, Bamford is one that I spoke to O'Neill actually in Russia, and at that point the situation with Bamford was the indications were that he has decided he wants to play for Ireland. I didn't get a mad enthusiasm off O'Neill about it, while also saying it's one that he's looking into. It is a strange one that we lose out by this rule, yet there is still people who are just desperate to hear of potential options that we can get. Obviously, Callum Robinson from Preston has come in this time, and O'Neill has indicated there's a few other irons in the fire and stuff that's working.
Good choice of words.
Exactly. I mean, it was almost like I meant it, but there is a few other players. I mean, there was Will Keane and Michael Keane's brother who's keen to declare. But I do think there is an element of O'Neill. He doesn't want to bring too many in, sort of in a scattergun policy, because that policy has been a bit of a failing at underage level.
We want to wrap on Declan Rice, so let's do that. I know Jamie Jackson's standing by to discuss José Mourinho. We're going to do that in a second. First of all, Brian Kerr was in conversation with Tommy Martin on TV3 last night. It was about Declan Rice. Here's how it went.
I feel Martin thought it was done. I don't accept what he said, that it's something to do with a new manager at the club and getting his place back, because I was at the match of the weekend. He was warming up extensively at half-time as if he was going to come on. I don't think that's an issue at all. It should mean he's more committed to play for Ireland if you're not playing the club. I think something has changed dramatically since all those lovely statements he made and the games he played. Remember, he played a match, the international match in Turkey. He came back and played the under-21 match during the week. I was at the game. He was the best player, and he celebrated with everyone at the end of the match.
His dad went out to Turkey with him. He said he was fully committed.
And Martin has said that the jerseys are in a case at home, and all those things make me think something has changed dramatically. I don't believe it's the influence of the agents. I don't believe that Gareth Southgate, impressive and all as England were at the World Cup, that has changed him, because his statements are so certain.
So what is it then, Brian?
Well, I hope it wasn't something that happened when he was in with the team. I hope that there wasn't some incident. I mean, Martin recently confirmed that there were altercations between players and one of the staff with Roy Keane. I hope there wasn't any incident or remarks made to Declan Rice that affected his view of the Irish setup and the Irish camp, because he did seem so happy within the environment. I also think Ed Malone said it in his piece in the Times this morning. It's complicated stuff, he said. I think it is about modern football. Modern rules rather than modern football. The rules have changed. I was able to pick Aidan McGeady when he was a young lad to play in a friendly match for us.
And it was done.
And that was the end of it. He was no going back. We had a situation where it used to be if you played underage football, that was the end of it. The rules changed that bit, changed another bit. Now it's wrong how the rules are. I think if you play in a friendly game at senior level, that should be the end of it.
We need to go back to that.
We need to go back to that, and we need our people who are strong in the political circles of European football to go and make that case. We have taken advantage of the rules by taking players in Northern Ireland. Now we may suffer on the rules.
Yeah, it's a fair point from Brian Kerr, who's always not far off the money. Speaking to TV3, Tommy Martin there last night, just about this entire thing. Obviously, the latest development was Declan Rice's club manager, Manuel Pellegrini, saying that he has a big problem. We discussed it a bit earlier, Dan, so we're not going to
go over it.
Linger too long on it, but really at this point, hearing from Declan Rice is the next step and presumably the final step in this.
Yeah, I think that is at some point he's going to have to address it, because he doesn't need this hanging over almost every game he plays. It's not really a huge story in England, it must be said, not like the Grealish one, which was a huge story in England because he had an amazing game in the Cup semi, but I mean, I definitely agree with Brian's point there with regard to the eligibility rules and the complications they present. I'm not sure if I buy that Rice could come out and say that something happened in camp is an influence in the decision in such a dramatic way, because when there were these disturbances in camp during the summer that I'm aware of anyway, that was before the first of the two games. Rice played two games, and as I said earlier, his last interaction with an Ireland squad, an Ireland press gig, was saying that the England speculation was a load of crap.
Yeah.
So I think you can't discount the influence of the agent and the club. You just
something
can't.
Were to have happened, it would, because like one of the obvious questions that gets asked every single time, particularly when there's a former player on the other end, is, well, if this guy was to come back, would he be accepted back in? Now, if there was an incident that had resulted in his departure, that would obviously, there wouldn't be a question to be answered there. That would be, well, there was an incident, so your patriotism, whatever way you want to describe it, isn't in question at that point. There was an incident, so that was the thing.
And I think there would be sympathy within the group from the other players if there was an incident. Obviously, James McLean has known that he doesn't agree with Rice's stand. So I just think there's an element of there's obviously, as I said earlier, there's a negativity towards O'Neill, but I don't think that should lead itself to people believing that would they have to be responsible for this? I think Rice's position has changed, and I think there's no doubt there's outside factors. It's pretty clear. You watch what David Gold is saying, and he's changed his agent, as I said. I can't have it that's nothing to do with it. I don't think that's the case.
Gary responds to our suggestion on Twitter a little bit earlier on that Darren Murphy could be back in the Ireland squad with just a simple lol. I mean, Well,
I mean, we've got Shane Long, who's not really playing for Southampton, and we've got John Walters, who's just gone on loan to Ipswich to get a game. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Murphy for Ireland. That's what I'm hearing.
I'm just saying to you, how many more goals does he score before this actually becomes real talking point?
Not many.
I'm not proposing it. I'm just saying.
You've proposed and I've seconded it. And that's it. Job done. That overrules everything. Right, José Mourinho with wall-to-wall Declan Rice last night, so that'll do you for the time being on that one. José Mourinho obviously has been a big talking point this week. United get hockey by Spurs on Monday night, and afterwards he has some interesting things to say to the press.
I'm sorry. You have to tell me what is the most important thing, because I don't know. Because when I win matches, I come here many times and you are not happy that I won matches, and you say that the most important thing is the way of playing.
I'm just asking about the defending.
No. You have to make a decision in relation to that, because I need to know from you what is the most important thing. If it is to play well or if it is to win matches. If it is to play offensively or is to play for a certain result. We lost last season here against Sevilla and we were booed because we deserve, because we were not good, because we were not dangerous enough, because Sevilla deserved to win the match. We were booed, and deservedly. And today the players, they left the pitch after losing at home and they were applauded because they deserve it. So you keep trying and trying and trying and keep trying and keep trying.
Is it not a bit of a distraction?
Now, just to finish, do you know that what was the result? 3-0.
You lost 3-0.
3-0. Do you know what this means? 3-0. But also mean 3 premierships, and I won more premierships alone than the other 19 managers together. 3 for me and 2 for them. Respect, man, respect, man.
Yeah, I mean 3-0 doesn't mean that, but there we go. Jamie Jackson is the Manchester football correspondent for The Guardian and The Observer and joins us on the line now. And Jamie, I understand the person responsible for most, if not all, of that exchange, the other side of it?
Yeah, I mean, the clip you played there, that he talks about the fans, and he went on a little bit more in the actual press conference saying, I learned, I'm paraphrasing, but I learned how good a judge of football fans are because they were clapping us at the end, at the Stretford end, despite the 3-0 loss. So I sort of said, well, in that case, considering, many fans left 5 or 10 minutes before the end of the game, maybe even earlier maybe, what kind of judgment does that give of your team if you yourself are saying, fans are good judge of football, and that's when he got a bit cheesed off, basically. His answer to that was, well, I would leave too because it takes 2 hours to get into Manchester City Centre. I live there. Well, it doesn't. It takes about, if you're walking, you can do it in 25 minutes. So anyway, from there he then went on and that stuff about, he told him his fingers, what does this mean? That was all sort of directed at me. Yeah, I mean, as I've sort of been saying about this, I've got no problem managers getting cheesed off. You've lost the game. But there's a wider picture here, really, which is there's pretty deep fault lines. At the club, really, it's not just down to Mourinho, but he's the main man because he's the manager. Maybe one way of looking at it is if this was Pep Guardiola, at the moment I'm talking about, would in charge of the same United squad, would they have lost at Brighton? Doubtful. And would they have lost 3-0 at home? I mean, whatever he says, it was a bit of a second half spanking. So, they've got deep problems there. Yeah,
and I mean the earliest indication that we had that there was going to be something interesting from Mourinho was the final whistle goes up to was it Stretford end, whatever end, there was sort of half full of United fans, as you've been saying, and he stands for roughly about a minute sort of applauding them, picks up a scarf and sort of walks on out. Like at that point I was kind of thinking, and I'm interested to get your impressions on it, this guy could be about to walk.
Well, yeah, and I hear what you said because I've covered Mourinho basically since he became manager of United, and I can't remember him doing that before. You know, he might have done it, say, when they won the Europa League in Stockholm, you know, at the end of the game when they won a final. But, you know what I'm saying? I don't really think I've ever seen it at Old Trafford. You did wonder what was going on there. But when he came into the press conference, you know, the clip of which you've just been playing, he went the other way. He was sort of defiant. And until he started, sort of descended into sort of, kind of respect. He was actually quite a good performance at the start of it. He was defiant, but he sounded like a man who was up for the fight. So you thought, okay, that wasn't a good buy. I mean, some people might say it's a sort of way of shoring up one of his key constituencies, you know, the fans. If he is cheesed off with, you know, Woodward, the board, for not giving that elite centre back, this sort of this issue that has become almost kind of, I think, overplayed. I mean, they've got the second best goals allowed in the Premier League for each of his 2 seasons. You know, the only teams that have done better than that have been the champions, Chelsea and Manchester City, in each of those 2 seasons. So I think it's a little bit of a red herring, the defence. So listen, he's not going anywhere at the moment. I think even if they lose at Burnley, you know, 1 or 2-0, he'll still be there. If they lose 10-0, it might be different. But he needs to turn it around. It's the biggest challenge of his career, basically.
Jamie, it's funny you mentioned like shoring up the constituency, and it does seem from maybe following this story that there still is a section of Manchester United fans that are with José Mourinho. And you can tell me I'm wrong. Like in terms of the regular, the hardcore, the away support, you know, the sort of dyed-in-the-wool Manchester United fans, what's the split now? What actually is the mood towards Mourinho?
It's a very interesting question, because if you sort of do a story that might be construed as not pro-Mourinho, but sort of getting behind him, you know, on Twitter you get a lot of anti-Mourinho stuff coming out, but then the vice versa is true. If you do a story that might be perceived as sort of criticising him, then you get a lot of pro-Mourinho. It's difficult to know exactly, but my sense is that, because I have a lot of friends. I'm not a United or City fan, but I have a lot of friends and family who are, and straw poll, of course, the impression is that they're a little bit sick of Mourinho, to be honest. And I think it is more that way. As I say, it's not a scientific poll, but my impression is that the more this goes on, I don't think. The thing is, if he was being more optimistic and more sort of rallying, I think they could forgive the defeat at Brighton more, and you know the Spurs game. But you know, I was on the tour with Manchester United in LA when he said in that very first press conference at their UCLA training base that this is going to be, you know, quote, very bad pre-season because all the players missing, and it just didn't go down well, that, because, you know, again, Manchester City had more players missing because of that reason, and Pep Guardiola went the other way and said, it's a good thing for our club, shows how successful we are, you know, all these players in the World Cup, and by the way, it gives a chance for young players, and Mourinho could have gone down that road, and since that first press conference, you know, the very first day of pre-season when the sun's shining, you're in LA, you can't be optimistic then, when can you, sort of thing, and since then he's sort of basically kept that kind of, I would say, negative, almost defeatist note about this season we're into now.
Just on the playing side, Jamie, for large parts, United they didn't look too bad. I mean, when they went 1-0 down, it could very easily have been 1-1, and who the hell knows what happens after that. Is it gone beyond the point of being retrievable almost now from Mourinho? What's your sense of what the future lies with this situation?
I don't think it's beyond retrievable. I agree with you, and I tell you what I liked as well, and it did backfire, so you can make a case that it was the wrong game to do it in, but I like the fact he sent out this very, completely new 3-3-3-1 formation that had Ander Herrera as a right-sided centre-back, because, you know, a criticism against him can be that he's outmoded, he's yesterday's man, he's a bit of a football tactician dinosaur. So here he was, as I say, in a pretty high-stakes game after losing at Brighton, willing to be brave and do something different, you know, to sort of outfox Spurs. As I say, it backfired. These things kind of tend to have to work at the elite level. So that, plus, as you said, the actual display in the first half was decent, I would say. And that's kind of why, I did a story yesterday morning online for The Guardian. That's kind of why the message from the sort of people who matter at the club was, yeah, we're still backing him. And one of the reasons was because of that first half performance. The word that was used to me was, quote, fantastic. That was the view, as I say, from sort of, you know, the top of the club. So I don't think it's irretrievable, but I do think he needs to sort of remember, and maybe it's too distant memory now, you know, the sort of José Mourinho the first Chelsea incarnation. Had a bit of a bounce about him. He was funny. You know, he was the complete opposite in a way. He was great company. Now it's a little bit of a, you know, it's always interesting, but you just wonder. You know, I'll be there on Friday at Carrington at the training base ahead of the Burnley game for the press conference, and you know, all eyes will be on him, and he's got a chance really to sort of reverse all of his press conferences so far. But I'm not so sure he'll do it.
Yeah, like I think people are struggling to figure out whether this guy's a busted flush.
Yeah, I know, and this is the thing about it. You almost think it's 3 years now since, and this was the other thing about this. You know, look at my three fingers. What does this mean? 3 Premier Leagues. It was a little bit. It's a bit of a shame, really, because you know, remember the thing you said about Wenger, a success in failure. Remember this?
Yeah.
You know, Arsene Wenger's got the same amount of Premier League titles as Mourinho now has, and it felt a little bit. Almost a sort of distraction again, because the point is no one's disrespecting his phenomenal record. You know, he won the treble with Internazionale, the first time that had ever been done in the Italian Football Champions League, Scudetto, Domestic Cup. He's won 8 league titles in 4 different leagues, countries. But the point is, the last one was 3 years ago, and you know, we're now 3 years on, and we're talking about the here and now, aren't we? And that's all that matters, really.
Jamie, do you think he was really angry when he left the room? I mean, this is one of these things, as you're there in the room, and see, with Mourinho, there's an element of theatre. I mean, it was a good line. It's clearly a line he's thought about. It's clearly a line that he didn't do the sums on the spot. That, people are talking about media relations now, and you're talking about the press conference on Friday, and you talk about LA more to the point. Like, how much of it is theatre, and how much of it is genuine emotion?
I think you're right. I think he had thought that line up because. Excuse me. You actually had to. When he said when he said he had more Premier League titles than any other manager put together current in the league, you went to Guardiola and you sort of search around for who the other one is. It's Pellegrini, obviously, at West Ham. He's the only other manager. So he, you know, I don't think he thought that off the top of his head. But what I do think is he was a little bit thrown when I sort of batted back the fans thing and said, well, a lot of them left, and I think he did start to. You know, I've never ever seen him really lose his temper. I'm not saying he was livid, but I think he was pretty irritated. So I think it's a combination of the two. I don't think he expected when he walked in there to be sort of going out the door in a huff saying respect, respect, respect. That wasn't, you know, it wasn't a particularly slick delivery of what probably was a pre-prepared, line or response. And you know, again, it shows that he knows he's got problems. Personally, I hope he turns it round because you know I cover City, I cover United. It's good fun when they're both fighting for the title. Hasn't really happened since the Mancini or the last Ferguson season. So let's hope he can do it. But if you look at Manchester City and even Liverpool, especially City, they look streets ahead, don't they, really, in terms of not just how they're playing, but the actual squad depth, etc.
One last one on it, Jamie. Some reports that he's like one game away from getting the sack. It's Burnley, I think, this weekend, so potentially he gets a reprieve. Gary Neville was obviously making a pretty impassioned case on Monday Night Football about the traditions of the club and obviously how they don't sack people. But what's your sense of where the club are at in terms of Mourinho's position at the minute?
Well, yeah, as I sort of said earlier, I'm not so sure if he was to lose at Burnley. My information is that they still think he thinks he can win the league, which might sound slightly ridiculous given the 2 defeats out of 3, but that's kind of who they're taking the lead from it. If he was going around being completely dour and very, very moany behind the scenes, negative, I don't think I would be getting told that sort of stuff. So listen, I could be wrong. Yeah. I understand why there might be the impression there with the players, because the players are always the last to know. But my sort of information is that unless there's a ridiculously bad or even a 2-0 defeat at Burnley, but they're not trying at all, I think he could afford to lose again. I don't think they will lose there, or it can be a difficult place to go. I'll be at the game. But they've then got Watford afterwards. So if they were to lose at Burnley and he limps on, and then they come back after a break, when he's had time to sort of recharge his batteries a bit, take stock, and then they lose. I think they're away at Watford, first game back on the 15th. Then I think he could be in serious trouble.
Just before you go, you have a nice bit of branding I see over your left shoulder. Who is D.I. Frederick Street? Jamie Jackson, spill the beans.
Yeah, he's the star of my debut novel, written under my fiction moniker, Jamie Paradise. Basically, he's a bent Met police detective who he's pushing 50, he loves house music, and he likes ripping off street games. And this novel is all about a fake coke bust, and it's a bit of a caper. If Pulp Fiction was a book, it might be nighttime cool. So yeah, if people want to give it a try. But it's been well received, and it's tongue in cheek each series. It's supposed to be a bit of fun.
Available in all good bookshops and some of the bad ones as well, I'm assuming.
Hopefully, yes.
Jamie, thanks a lot for taking the call. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, James. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Jamie Jackson there on the line, talking all things José Mourinho. John Millard on Twitter, who looks as though he's an Irish United fan. Not overly enamoured with Jamie's thoughts there. He says his non-scientific poll says the fans don't back Jose. A lot of fans are now starting to realise that the Glazers and Woodward are the problem, but that never gets mentioned because Jose is the story.
Yeah, I sort of raised that question because I do note that, some of the lads, such as Jamie, who cover Manchester United, that they seem to be embattled. Every story that they get involved in, there seems to be different factions. They have a go at Pogba. There's Pogba defenders. There's Mourinhoites, and yet there's people who are on the other side of the equation completely. So, these vox pops as well that pop up in Sky and stuff. It seems to be a bit all over the shop. There's no sort of coherent view, where there's the baying mob all going one way. It seems a bit more complex than that.
All right, 2-1.
Crazy game this. Newcastle 1-0 down to Nottingham Forest. They equalise in the 91st minute. Rondon scores, and so we're heading for extra time. And everyone's sort of thinking, do we want another half an hour of a League Cup game? Yeah. But Forest goes straight down the other end, and I'm not sure who got to finish, but it was a pretty.
It wasn't Darren Murphy.
It wasn't Darren Murphy. But Forest, gone 2-1 up. 2 goals in injury time, and Forest look like they're going through, and Rafa and Newcastle going out unless they do something in 30 seconds. Very
good. Few quick contacts here on Instagram. This in relation to the Declan Rice conversation, and the latest developments, obviously, in terms of Manuel Pellegrini's comments that he's got a problem. Phil Dunphy is that guy
Modern Family.
Modern Family.
Yeah.
One of my favourite TV characters.
It'd be pretty cool if he was sending a comment.
The kid in that show is one of my least favourite. The kid who's the son of your man from
2. Married with Children.
Yes, yeah. You know that kid that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the kid, the Manny. Yeah.
Incredibly annoying kid.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's his,
so contrived.
I think that's his character though, is meant to be an annoying kid.
So it's beyond contrived.
You actually don't like the script work, basically.
No, I'm sure he's a fine actor and I'm sure he's an upstanding human being. It's just the character's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. If he's
Forest for 3-1, beautiful. Little chip goal, 96.5 minutes.
Forest going through, game over.
Anyway, Phil Dunphy says it's all because it adds value to their asset. The whole thing leaves a bad taste in the mouth.
They don't have that many English players, West Ham, and I think that is it's definitely a factor.
John Tiz says just forget this chap and stop talking about him now. Doesn't deserve any of it. Let him off, says David Connolly. Should be an honour to play for Ireland, not a choice.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Owen Kaiser had a funny tweet the other day saying that, and I can relate to this, that maybe he reckons around 83% of Ireland press conferences are about players that aren't there. And I think that probably stands the test of time over the course of a decade, from Stephen Ireland to Andy Reid to Wes Hoolin or whoever it might be. It is true.
Makes a lot of sense. We're going to do our competition winner now. Excellent. Earlier on we gave you a chance to win a pair of tickets to come along to our exclusive night in the Back Page pub. It's in Phibsborough next Wednesday night. It's an audience with Mark Lawrenson and with Ronnie Whelan, Dan.
Oh, very good, yeah.
It's going to be chaired by
Phibsborough, yeah.
Stone Cold Killer himself, Kevin Kilban.
Nice.
And it's a
football area. It's a football area as well. I like that. Yeah.
It's a football area. I suppose it is.
It is. Dalymount is literally just down the road.
A stone's throw. Yeah. We asked you who won more caps for Ireland, Mark Lawrenson or Ronnie Whelan.
I thought it was going to be Kevin Kilban. I was like, this quiz is over.
Mark Lawrenson or Ronnie Whelan?
Do you want me to guess?
Yeah.
It'd be Ronnie Whelan.
Yeah, you're spot on. He won 53 caps to Laura's 39. Congratulations to Dee Kelly. Well done, Dee, who's won that pair of tickets. So if you missed out tonight, though, you're going to have another chance to win tomorrow night. We're going to have, it's not many, it doesn't take a huge amount in the pub. So it's an exclusive audience, that's how we're framing it.
Yeah.
It's a small event, but we'll give you another chance to win tomorrow night if you didn't have any success there. It's our exclusive night, the Back Page pub, next Wednesday, the 6th of September, all in association with Boyle Sports. We're talking Bundesliga next.
GAA on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster than ever Boyle Sports app for exclusive price enhancements on the biggest games around. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
The Pat Kenny Show.
On tomorrow's programme,
3 months since Ireland voted to introduce abortion, we'll hear from Doctors for Choice. Cork woman Jordan Keane on her sister's tragic horse riding accident and her campaign to help with her recovery. Filmmaker Maurice Sweeney on the IRA bomber Dolores Price, and Pete the Vet will be here in studio. So if you've questions, get in touch by emailing patkenny@newstalk.com.
The Pat Kenny Show
with MasterCard.
Tomorrow morning from 9
on Newstalk.
You're in Ireland's hidden heartlands, on the shores of Lough Derg, ready to take to the water. Do you pick up a paddle, kayaking your way towards Killaloo? Try a spot of fishing, catching something light for lunch. Or stick to solid ground, enjoying the views from horseback instead. Ireland's hidden heartlands, yours to uncover. Find out more at discoverireland.ie.
Off the ball. This is Newstalk.
Yeah, some commotion at the end of that League Cup game between Forest and Newcastle. It seems like the referee didn't award a penalty decision.
Iossi Perez has been sort of calmed down by Rafa, who's had to come on and quite literally put the arm around his shoulder and try and take him away from whatever situation is unfolding. So yeah, I suspect we'll hear more about that one.
Noel Fitzpatrick on Facebook says at the time of the Dr. Canero affair, Mourinho had a chance to show some humility, and he might have been forgiven to some extent when he took the United role after the Chelsea disaster. He could and should have shown some humility, and now with everything collapsing around him, he should show some humility, accept some blame, and I think he can turn it around the team. I should add, as a Liverpool fan, I think he's doing a great job.
Oh yeah,
I'd say everybody else is
step away, Agent Mourinho. Well, isn't it? He's still living in a hotel, I think, in Manchester.
He's still living in and moaning about it, no doubt.
The Lowry, is it, or something?
The Lowry,
like
yeah.
Fancy hotels. I mean, you need Kilban here to go through Manchester's hotspots, but
yeah.
I think he's there, which isn't a great mission statement, really, in terms of like I'm here for the long haul.
It's a bit of the sort of Roy Keane approach to. I mean, it's grand and all, and the players should live here, but you know. I'm not really going to overly commit myself.
I'm straight out of here in that flight on Saturday evening, and I'll be back when I need to be.
Can I get a podcast of this later? Asked Paul Henderson on Facebook. You can indeed. Just get yourself along to offtheball.com, and that'll be there waiting for you. So a couple of other bits and pieces to get to, which we'll do in just a few minutes, but we do want to talk Bundesliga because the new season is underway, and we want to get a bit of a fix on exactly what's happening, most especially with Bayern Munich. And to do all of that, I am delighted to say that Jonathan Harding, who's a writer for DW Sports, joins us on the line. Good evening to you, Jonathan.
Good evening, gent.
That's a pretty interesting room you've got going on there. Give us a bit of a mini tour, if you would, before we kick off.
Yeah, it's the living room. I happen to have a few jerseys. I swapped them out because I collect them. That's the Germany kit from back in the day, the green away one.
Yeah.
That's the England one, Euro 2000. That's the Brighton kit from when we were promoted. I'm a Brighton fan. And the Bahamas international kit because I used to live there.
Right, well, that's pretty good. And a mini tour it was, so appreciate that. So the Bundesliga got underway, I think, last weekend. Bayern Munich, I mean, it's all eyes on Bayern Munich, clearly, from a European point of view. They got underway with a 1-0 win over Hoffenheim. New manager, first season in charge. The Kovac brothers, indeed, are both there. What are the early signs of his style or what he's going to bring to Bayern Munich?
Oh, it's tricky. Niko Kovac has been entrusted with the biggest job of his career, a lot of expectation. He's never really had to deal with this kind of pressure or attention or the kind of egos. Early signs are good. Players seem to be saying on a number of different occasions that he's got the tactical ability. The question is whether the squad's really good enough. I mean, Bayern Munich have spent more of the summer getting rid of players than bringing anyone in. Leon Goretzka comes in on a free. Everybody knew about that. Serge Gnabry comes back from a loan spell, as does Renato Sanchez. But they've not really gone out and bought anyone, and I think part of the reason for that is this lack of trust from Uli Hoeneß and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge up top. They are waiting to see if Niko Kovac is going to be the right guy. I think next summer is a summer when they spend 100 million on a player, but right now they're not sure whether Kovac is going to be the right guy. On Friday, they got the rub of the green against Hoffenheim, who were pretty good. I think they deserved a point, but I don't expect anything less than a title win.
Looking through his CV, it doesn't jump out as this is a sort of top European coach. What's he doing at the club?
Kovac?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of expectation about the fact that they didn't really want him. He wasn't the first choice. Thomas Tuchel was supposed to be the guy. He didn't come in. There was talks about other managers coming in before. Bayern have quite, I think, openly in some respects sort of been talking about Niko Kovac not being the first choice. And I think that's not easy for Kovac, but at the same time, he's not going to pass up on that opportunity. What's he doing at the club is a fair question. I think Bayern are in a fortunate position that they could almost employ anyone and win the Bundesliga. And they'll probably do that this season. The question is whether they can win the Champions League. But for me, that's less on the manager this year and more on the squad.
So Jonathan, look, what is the main talking points or the main interest around this season from your perspective? Because I think, like, from afar, people look at the Bundesliga. It's been a one-club domination for a period of time. Yet at the same time, like, the crowds are still amazing. You know, there's still a great supporter culture. So it's not turning people off in Germany. But where does the intrigue come from this season for you?
I think this is a decisive season for the Bundesliga. I think it's got some decisions to make. I think it's got to try and retain its soul, what makes it so important, but also improve its competitiveness. The way that German teams have been playing in Europe has been completely unacceptable, particularly the sides that get into the Europa League. More teams have got to do better in that situation. And then there's obviously questions about how to do that. How do you get teams better if all the Bundesliga seems to do, in terms of the big picture, is sell players? That's its biggest issue. It's got to retain them for a little bit longer and then accept the fact that in the food chain, they are the league that develops rather than allows players to shine, which I don't think it should have a problem with. Its aspiration is to be the Premier League, which is part of the problem. It's torn between wanting to be this organically growing, fan-cultured league where young players rise and become stars, but at the same time, it also wants to be the number one in the world. And I think that's where my focus lies. How is the league going to deal with that in another season? Because ultimately, it has to be more competitive. They only have one top team in this country, and that's Bayern Munich, and that has to change. But at the same time, you have to look at it from a different perspective and say there's a lot to like about this league. It's developmental for coaches and for players, and that's not a bad thing. It's whether they can find the middle ground between the two and not lose that soul, that connection to the fans, but also improve its competitiveness.
It's almost like an impossible balance to walk in some respects.
Yes.
I know that, like Joshua Kimmich has been talking about it as well over the course of the last week, that, I mean, the Premier League is a pretty shiny, attractive thing that's not a million miles away. There's a lot of money swirling around in it. There's a lot of competitive teams, as we saw in the Champions League, obviously, last year. Like, it's a very difficult thing to walk if they are trying to be this league that promotes young players and also trying to, at some point down the track, become the best league in Europe.
And I think that's the point now where we're approaching, where the league really has to decide what it wants to do. I think if it wants Bayern Munich subconsciously in a way to continually win titles, then it can't hold its hand up and say, well, you know, we're not really doing enough to make it competitive. That's part of the problem. If you're going to make it more competitive, then you have to accept that you're going to lose some of the fan culture. If you're not willing to lose that fan culture, then you have to accept that the league might not be the best in the world. But this is a league that will never have even dreamed of being where it is now, 10, 15 years ago. So there's a certain level of acceptance that I think the league has to take into consideration because of the development that it's giving to players now. And I think a lot of young players look at this league in Europe as an opportunity, and there's nothing wrong to be the stepping stone. I think Germany just has to accept that they might not be number one in that regard, but it's okay not to be number one because they serve a very important purpose.
Does Kovac get I mean, it sounds like they've taken a bit of a punt here, probably because they had to, and it sounds like he's everybody expects him to win the Bundesliga this season. What's the expectation in terms of the European aspect? Like, I mean, quarterfinals, semi-finals, there's a pretty obvious progression there at some point. What's the expectation this season?
This season, I think the expectation is probably just to make the quarterfinals. I think Bayern Munich are always expected to be in the Final Four, but this squad isn't necessarily good enough. As I said, Boateng might be leaving. That's still up in the air. Juan Bernat is probably leaving to PSG. They've already lost players. Sebastian Rudi recently left to Schalke. They've lost players in positions where I'm not sure this squad is necessarily then best equipped to take on all three competitions. I mean, they could win the Bundesliga with a large number of B-team players, and that's a separate conversation. But for Europe, they're going to need more. And, you know, here we are again. Kingsley Coman is injured. He got injured on Friday. Here we are again talking about a Bayern Munich side relying on Frank Ribery and Ian Robben. And I can't help but feel that that's not enough. When you look at the likes of Juventus or Manchester City, the teams and the depth that they have in those situations, I can't see it from Bayern's perspective. And I think that's less to do with Kovac's ability as much as it's going to be the first time he's going to be in that situation, and that's going to be difficult for him. I think it's more to do with the squad just not being ready and Bayern's board waiting for one more season to be sure.
Jonathan, just to go back to the developmental point you make, I mean, and particularly in coaching, and Julian Nagelsmann, who was a story that went around the world almost when he was appointed as the youngest manager at 28. Now, I think he was mentioned as a Real Madrid manager in the summer, a potential candidate, but he's going to Red Bull Leipzig at the end of this forthcoming season from Hoffenheim. That's, again, like culturally, that's a strange one. I don't know how that's been received, that it's known that this manager is off to a rival at the end of an entire season. But what's the sense and what's the mood around that?
Well, there is a certain sense of understanding because he's moving to a club to work with Ralf Rangnick, who he has a good relationship with because of Ralf Rangnick's previous time at Hoffenheim, and when Nagelsmann was there as a youth coach, there's obviously some sort of a connection there. There's an obvious step towards a squad with better players, perhaps more money at his disposal as well, and really the expectation that he's going to be at a club that's going to be consistently in the Champions League. Now, that's on Leipzig to achieve this year, which will be a big challenge for them considering that they've lost Naby Keita. But I don't think there's any sense of surprise really around the league. Nagelsmann has certainly made some strides. He's not quite where I think some of the media expects him to be. Obviously, this talk of Real Madrid, I think he acknowledged that in the summer and said, you know what, I know that I've still got to take my steps and still got a long way to go. And he's very grounded. I think he understands that he's not quite near that top level that the media bills him to be just because of his age. So the move isn't necessarily seen as controversial. It makes sense in a lot of respects. But the question will be, will that affect how Hoffenheim play this season? Because that could then have an effect on how his record looks as a coach.
Quick word on Borussia Dortmund before we let you away, Jonathan. New manager, I think, there as well. Lost some players, obviously, over the course of the summer. Yarmolenko, Sokratis, Schürrle as well, and some interesting players coming in. What's your expectation for them this year?
I'm actually really excited about Borussia Dortmund this year. Lucien Favre is the new coach, as you mentioned, and he's come back. He's got experience in the Bundesliga. He used to coach at Gladbach. He had that Gladbach side absolutely purring a few years ago when Marco Reus was in that team. He's now the captain of Borussia Dortmund after Favre gave him the armband. I'm excited. They got Axel Witsel in midfield. They've signed Thomas Delaney from Werder Bremen. They've got a very exciting young defensive partnership with Diallo and Akanji. There's reason to believe that the way that they can play football with Favre, which is very high line, very quick ball out wide, very neat attacking play, there's reason to believe that they could be very, very fun to watch. Whether they'll challenge Bayern, that's always the question. Jonathan, thanks a lot. We might catch up with you again during the season. Take care, gents. Always a pleasure. Jonathan Hardig there, DW Sports. Mairead Fitz on Twitter says, surely I can't be the only one who's slightly concerned about Jose's state of mind at the moment.
Again, if it's theatre or is it this how he feels? Because he does have the potential to be both. He has the potential to burn. I mean, if you live your life at that level of intensity and desire for conflict and so on, like there is, like, without being too serious about it, there is a danger, like a serious burnout hitting you somewhere down the line.
Pat Kelly on Facebook says hello. Good evening to you, Pat. Hope all is well. Dan, that's pretty much it from us for the minute.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks very much. No worries.
Enjoy that. Tom Dunn is up next. No, we're going to ads and we'll be back in a minute.
Off the ball on News Talk.
Put the brakes on searching for car insurance yourself. Visit chill.ie, get your quick quote, and you're away. Chill Insurance Limited, trading as Chill Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
This summer means fast ground and tight grass. It's longer sessions under the shadow of the high ball. Calling Bagsy for the lift, tight haircuts and looking for the shift. But mostly it's waiting for exam results, the matchday squad, that chance. Because the moment you cross the white line, you're not just playing, you're totally alive. Some moments teach you everything you need to know about yourself. The Electric Ireland GAA Minor Championships. This is major.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yeah, we're in garbage time here on Off the Ball this evening, Dan.
Some would say we've been in it for some time.
Well, look at the look of panic in the box was, I mean, a thing to behold.
It's always injury time. The board hadn't gone up yet for
the board hadn't gone up. I jumped the gun. Let's face it. One quick talk about particularly we want to get to in just a second, but I do want to say that tonight's mystery voice was Joe Schmidt. That I think
I got it on the third go.
Yeah. Congratulations to Ross O'Donoghue, who's won a pair of VIP tickets. That's Ross O'Donoghue to our show at Croke Park tomorrow night. You're going to get a meet and greet with Jim McGuinness, James Horan, Kieran McGeaney, Cora Staunton, Aidan O'Shea, Keith Barr and Peter Canavan. That show is off air. We're going to play some of the highlights on Friday's show, but if you want to be there tomorrow night in the Hogan Suite with us, you just need to get yourself along to, I don't know that there are any tickets left. There may be a couple. We were close to sold out a bit earlier today. You need to get yourself along to offtheball.com/events. Tomorrow morning's OTB AM will be live. We'll tell you about that in a second. Taking a jump in the gun. Aidan Fitzmaurice has been chatting to Graham Kavanagh, Dan,
in the Herald. Yeah, we're sort of going back on the Declan Rice thing.
Yeah, it's a good story.
But a broader point, just speaking to Graham Kavanagh, whose son Callum is a talented footballer with Middlesbrough, obviously a club where Graham played. And he was just speaking about the fact that the English FA have been going after his own son to try and get into play, which just throws an insight into how active the English FA switched off. You go a long way back in history. Even you mentioned Mark Lawrence was in our quiz. Like players who they let slip. They just they were asleep at the wheel, really. And it is something that even in more recent times they've been accused of doing, but they've got their act together. Like, they are a top nation at underage. They're winning European tournaments and they're spreading the net far and wide. And Kavanagh said that there's no chance with his son going there.
My son was asked to represent England, but there was no chance. He said he's completely Irish. The fact that Declan Rice has played, he's gone on about Declan Rice and he's not happy about that situation.
Yeah, but I suppose it is a case though where, I know Declan Rice's dad is keen for him to play, but when you have the dad who's sort of first generation Ireland, grew up in Ireland to a point, you've always got a better chance as well.
Yeah.
It's just natural, the passing of time. The 18-year-old with a grandparent mightn't have the strong, passionate feelings just by product of the way society and life has changed for communities in England even, but obviously Graham Kavanagh is making sure that young Callum, if he makes it all the way through, no pressure by the way, but if he makes it all the way through, he'll be wearing green.
We'll have him. Dan, thanks a million for coming in.
No worries.
Enjoy that. The lads are back tomorrow night from 7 o'clock on your radio and on social streams as well. The rest of the show will be over with an event at Croke Park, as we've been telling you all evening. Tomorrow morning's OTBAM live from 7:45 with Jaron Owen. They'll be talking to the voice of the UFC, Bruce Buffer. He's got an amazing personal story, so get yourself along to youtube.com/offtheball, Facebook and Twitter as well. You can watch all of that tomorrow night live at 7 o'clock with John Giles. Richie's in the house. Kevin will be in the house as well. We'll be looking back at the 1995 All-Ireland final with Charlie Redmond and Tyrone's Seamus McCallan. So all of that good stuff to come from us for the minute. Good luck. Tom Dunn is next. We'll chat to you tomorrow.